Last week we started talking about toxic relationships and more specifically, how do we get ourselves out of toxic relationships? And one of the core themes of that video was that it starts with us, that we first have to do interior work within ourselves so that then we can create the version of ourselves that essentially is able to identify a toxic relationship in the first place. One of the problems with toxic relationships is that we don't have the interior built to be able to even identify them. Because if we were masters at identifying toxic relationships, then we would be able to see all the warning signs. We'd be able to identify all the red flags. And one of the problems is sometimes we even see the red flags and we continue to pursue the relationship anyways. And we kind of lie to ourselves and we say, oh, that's not a big deal. Like that thing that I'm noticing, like it'll just work itself out and, we'll be able to get past that. And a lot of times this can come out of a deep-seated insecurity of like, we want this relationship so bad. We don't like being alone. And so being with someone who has these red flags is better than being alone. And so instead of recognizing, okay, there's a red flag right there, we say, hey, like that red flag is not a big deal. Let's continue to pursue the relationship anyways. And even if this person has this thing, being with them will be better than being alone. And then we get ourselves so woven into the relationship itself that it's like impossible to get ourselves out of it because we're so webbed. Our lives have become so webbed into this relationship that what would have once been relatively easy to steer away from has now become this massive blockade that we're unable to drive around. Because the thing is, when we're early on in a relationship with someone, whether it be someone we're considering as a romantic partner or someone who is a friend or a business relationship, the easiest time to cut off a relationship is in the beginning. The reason that it's easiest is because there's no real context. There's not a lot of context there. And so if we identify the red flags in the beginning and we say, hey, like I noticed this thing, it kind of goes against my values, it goes against my standards, like I think this is going to be a really big problem for us in the future. And so, it's time for me to move on. Like I wish you the best, but, there's just this thing that is getting in the way, not getting in the way, but there's this thing that doesn't really mesh with me very well. And I think it's going to be a problem. And so, like with all due respect, like it's time to move on. And we're not very good at that, are we? We're not very good at setting a standard and setting a boundary. Now, setting a standard and setting a boundary is often really difficult for us because we don't honor those standards and boundaries ourselves. And so if we're in toxic relationships, we are likely breaking our own standards and our own boundaries. And through that process, we've actually lost trust with ourselves. We no longer trust ourselves because we've broken commitments to ourselves time and time again. And so we know internally that most likely if I set a commitment, I'm going to break it. And so what do? We avoid commitment. We avoid commitment because we know that historically we have broken those commitments. And so what's the point? If I'm just going to say I'm going to do this thing and end up not doing it anyways, then why would I even try? And so we start to kind of get into this defeatist mentality. And the world now kind of starts to feel like it's something that's happening to us instead of us happening to the world, as if we have value and we have a say in what happens in our lives. Because, well, if we can't make a commitment, then what can we do other than just steer through life and kind of hope for the best? And so in large part, navigating our way through toxic relationships is about building an interior self that is fortified. So how do we actually do that? Because it's very challenging. It's very challenging to go from this person who is not able to commit to anything, who's not able to discipline themselves, who has a fractured identity, who's kind of broken inside, who feels like they're going to lose anyways, so what's the point of even trying? It's very difficult to go from that person to what's on the other side. And so then we decide, to sort of to settle. We decide to settle and, take what we can get. And so this is kind of the mentality and the inner workings that leads us to toxic relationships in the first place. So how do we start building? How do we start to rebuild our lives and reorient ourselves so that we can actually build this interior self and create a healthy relationship with ourselves as the foundation so that we can go out and we can create healthy relationships with other people? That's where we got to start. That's the starting point. The starting point isn't going to therapy and talking about your problems. It's not ruminating. It's not blaming the other person. We have to start in here. So we have to start in here, but what are the actual practical things that we need to do in order to build a healthy interior self? Well, a really big part of this is understanding what the self even is. That's a very deep philosophical question to start asking yourself, but it all kind of orients around this question of who am I? What am I? Why am I? And so that's why it's really difficult to start working your way out of that, is because the answers to those questions are very difficult to come to. And they're very difficult to start working out. But it's not impossible. It's just very, very challenging. And so that's why you see so many people who will settle for toxic relationships with themselves, with God, with their family, with their spouses. They will settle for that because it's really difficult and challenging to start asking yourself these questions and to start working through the process of discovering an answer. And so that's kind of the base level. That's where you kind of have to start building this interior self. Because you sort of have to take an audit. You have to genuflect and reflect on your life in order to figure that out. The problem with that is that it's very difficult to do that because of the toxic relationship that you have with yourself. It's very difficult to do that because over time you've broken commitments, you've done this, that, and the other thing. You've experienced this trauma, and so your life starts to become this pit, this abyss that you don't want to look into because you don't know what's going to happen if you do look into it. But that's where it starts. Because asking the question of who am I, well, that'll start to bring up your past experiences. You might say something like, oh, my name is CJ, like I grew up in Cadott, Wisconsin. It's a town of like 1,500 people. My parents are Jason and Tabitha. Um, I did pretty well in school. And so you start to recollect all of these different memories associated with your life because that's who you think you are. And that's who you are. But how do we transform who you are into who you desire to be, who you want to be, who you aspire to be? And most importantly, in your heart of hearts, in your soul, in your spirit, in that small little inkling, that small little still voice that remains in your head that's calling you to be something better. So how do you start to transform? Well, a really big part of transformation is changing the story, because we see the world through the lens of a story. And we know that we see the world through a lens of a story because when we ask the question, who am I? We tell ourselves what? We tell ourselves a story. So then in order for us to transform inside, we need to transform the story. But in order to transform the story, we first have to know the accurate representation of the story. We have to know elements of our past. We have to know what things happened to us in life that made us into who we are today. So there's our individual history, and then there's also our family history. Our family history can actually be very powerful to know. For example, there's a lot of people in my family in prior generations who struggled with things like mental illness and schizophrenia. And had I had known that when I was younger, I don't know what I would have done. I probably wouldn't have done anything much different. But looking back on it now, I learned these things later on in life that people in my family struggle with mental illness and schizophrenia. And now I can look back and see like, oh, when I was addicted to things and they were impacting me in a very negative way, and it could have led to, complete disassociation, could have led to like a very bad mental disorder. I can look back on it now and see with a little bit more clarity of, it would have been pretty obvious that could have happened because of my family history. So there's the family history, there's the world history aspect, understanding more about your culture, also other cultures is very helpful. But it's like, okay, like what are you even talking about, dude? Like you're talking about, what is this, history class now? But when we start asking that question of who am I, you start exploring history. So you have to understand historically who you were so that you can know who you are today in this moment and why you became the person that you became. And why do we have to know that? Well, we have to know that so that we can start to rewrite the narrative, especially because at some point we lost the narrative. We lost the narrative. And what I mean by that is we lost control of the narrative. And it's not that we control the narrative, it's that we have an influence on the narrative. So in order for us to start influencing the narrative, we have to kind of start to take the bull by the horns. There's an element of taking responsibility for your life, and ideally taking maximum responsibility for your life. Taking responsibility for all the things that have happened to you. Not that they're all your fault, but if you do not take those things by the reins, then they will forever have dominion over you. They will control you because you can't change what happened to you, but you can change how you respond to what happened to you. And right now, maybe your response to what happened to you has been that, oh, it's the world's fault, or it's this person's fault. But when you say it's their fault, and you put the blame on them, that takes away your power. So taking responsibility for your life and for all the things that happen to you isn't about them. It's about you. It's about us. Because in order for us to take control of the narrative again, if we ever had it, and to start influencing the narrative of our life, the story of our life, we have to accept that those things happen to us, and then we have to take responsibility for them and try to identify where were my shortcomings in that situation. You know, if we were really young, likely our shortcomings were just that we were really young. We didn't have a say. Like, we didn't have power. We didn't have any authority. We didn't have any skills. We didn't have any intelligence to be able to avoid that situation. And so it's reasonable to conclude that, yes, bad things are going to have happened to us when we were kids because we couldn't really do much. We couldn't do much about it. Now we can. As we get older, as we grow in competence and in our skills and in our overall ability to produce outcomes, we start to grow into these faculties that now give us the ability to learn new things, to learn new skills. And by learning new things and learning new skills, we can also heal our previous selves. Because if you struggled with something as a kid that now as an adult you can help yourself with and maybe even help other people with, or, you know, help your family, your future family, to avoid these things that you faced, these challenges that you faced when you were younger, that can actually be a very restorative and healing process. And that's all a part of your redemption arc. And it's not that we redeem ourselves, because the only person that can redeem us is God and His Son, but we have to take reins of the story. We have to take reins of the story. Otherwise, we're just going to be a product of the story. And we're not going to have any say over the story. And our lives are going to end in something like a tragedy because we lost it. We lost the narrative. All right, so kind of tracing the steps back now. In order for us to regain influence over the narrative, we have to take responsibility. And that by taking responsibility, we can bounce back. But we have to go back and reconcile with all that before we do. But by doing that, we can create lasting impact and change really quickly. The challenge for me was that this all took me 9 years to figure out. You know, I kind of started my redemption arc in 2017 when I was like 18 years old. That's when I started to get into like entrepreneurship and spirituality and understanding more about the self. But, you know, I didn't have someone who was like coaching me in person. I did join some coaching programs, but nothing like what I'm talking about with you today. Because over that span of 9 years, I've learned what are the core things that actually created change, that actually influenced change. And most importantly, like the things that I was looking for all the way back then, they're not the things that I'm looking for today. Because if you're seeking transformation, and you're seeking transformation because you want to be in healthy relationships, the thing is when you transform, your desires and what you want transforms with it. And so it transforms with it. So the things that you want now are not going to be the things that you want when you're transformed. But the thing is, with human behavior, we have to see progress in order to create internal motivation to move forward, to keep doing the things, which is really interesting. It's a really interesting part of transformation. It's like you have to pursue the things that you want now so that you can then become the person who wants completely different things that you can then pursue in the future. But if we just stop the behavior and pattern of pursuing what we want, that's kind of a problem too. Whoa! Where am I? Sorry, I just scared my dogs. I just woke up underneath my desk to tell you, hey, if you're enjoying this video and you want some more content just like it, I actually have a free Facebook group that you can go and join and engage with a bunch of people who are like you, who are interested in similar topics, and you can get more content from me if that's something you're interested in. So go down to the link in the description and you will find the Facebook group. Even if what we want is sort of tainted, maybe it's hedonistic in its core, maybe it's materialistic in its core, but basically as we transform, our wants and our desires will transform with us as we grow in our character. Like I was obsessed with like making a certain amount of money every month, with having a certain career, with, you know, finding a relationship. But as I transformed, those things became less important because my identity started to shift. I started to value my faith in God more than anything else. And so in that valuing of faith in God, I realized that it's not about me. Like in part, it's about me. You know, just because it's not about me doesn't mean I shouldn't take care of myself. Just because it's not about me doesn't mean that I shouldn't try to improve my spiritual, mental, and physical well-being. It's actually quite the opposite. That would be a nihilistic approach. But God doesn't call us to take a nihilistic approach. You know, He calls us to be good stewards. Good stewards for our families, for our communities, so that we can carry the light of the world and share it with the world. So as our identity transforms, our wants and our desires transform with it. And, you know, that's exactly what happens. But we need this identity transformation to start to navigate ourselves away from toxic relationships. Because through the process of creating a healthy relationship with ourselves, through the things and the modes that we just laid out, well, we can then project that out into the world, and we realize that through things like strength and determination and perseverance and faith and honesty and chastity and pursuing something like selflessness, where it's no longer about us, it's actually about something bigger, but I'm a piece in that thing that's bigger, so I need to treat myself as if I'm taking care of something I'm responsible for. Because like when people say this all the time, when they have kids, it changes them. It fundamentally changes them because they feel now like they have something that they're responsible for, because they do, and they're responsible for this innocent life. But they were always responsible for their own life. They were always responsible for it. But there's varying degrees of our ability to execute on our responsibilities. For example, if you have responsibilities at work, and let's say you're responsible for mopping the floors, but if you're really bad at mopping and you don't understand the skill of mopping, then you're not going to be able to execute on your responsibility very well. You have to first develop out your skill set of mopping and cleaning so that you can then do a really good job at executing your responsibilities. So responsibility a lot of times can get lost in translation because it seems like this abstract thing that we just do, and that it's not something we have to like work towards in order to like execute upon it well. and we don't realize that there's like varying degrees of being able to execute our responsibilities. But there is. There's a level of skill and competency involved with taking responsibility. And so that's the same thing for ourselves. When we take responsibility for ourselves, a lot of us don't have a lot of skill and competency when it comes to that actual process. And that by learning how to take responsibility for ourselves, how to take responsibility for our actions, how to take life by the horns, and to decide, hey, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to give up no matter what. And we just take that stance. And we realize that this whole time we haven't given up. The ultimate form of giving up would be something like death. And we're still here. And so you have proven to yourself over time that you haven't given up. You just can't see it. You just can't see it because everything that you see is muddled with all the broken commitments. All the broken commitments come from the things that you currently value. Okay, part of rewriting that redemption arc and rewriting the story and taking control or taking influence over your narrative, taking the narrative back so that you have some influence over it, part of that is coming up with who you're going to be. Who do you want to become and why? Okay, so when we look at ourselves, we are like behavior machines. We're animated by this spirit. And one of the issues is that when we start to worship and orient ourselves towards things that might not be the best for us, what happens is that over time, we start to accumulate demons. Because demons are constantly looking for a way to attach themselves to you so that they can influence your life, so that they can steer you towards sin. And so over time, as we build up this collection of bad behavior, at the same time, we have demons that are latching themselves onto us. We have a spiritual battle happening between good and evil, and that by not pursuing good and holiness, what happens is that evil will literally attach itself to us. We will draw evil in. And so part of taking responsibility for ourselves and our story is taking our spiritual life by the reins and realizing like this demon stuff is real. That's one of the things that really deepened my faith, was that as I was reading through the Bible, the demons would literally cower at Jesus. They even recognized that he was the Messiah, that he was the Son of God. And they fled whenever he called them to. Like, he had complete dominion over the demons. But so as we go through our life, we collect these demons. They start to inhabit themselves within us, and they start to influence our lives. They start to take the narrative of our life. And they start planting thoughts in our head. And they keep driving us to the same situations where, we're doing the bad behavior. They're making us addicted to things. They're making us feel certain illnesses and attitudes towards things. They're filling us up with anger and rage and envy and resentment. So these things start to build up in us over time. And in order for us to start clinging to something like goodness, we got to rid ourselves of those demons. And the only way to do that is through a spiritual practice. I recommend the Catholic Church. How do we know this? Well, nobody likes confession. I mean, there's very few people who like confession. I have a lot of respect and reverence towards confession because I know what it does. It's because over time, as those demons infest our spirit and latch themselves onto us, what happens when we go into confession and we put all of our sins before God, is he actually cleanses us of those demonic presence, of those demonic entities that are latching themselves to us. And so we know this because after confession, we now feel this lightness. And it's through this physical act, strangely, that we can obtain this lightness, where demons can actually be expelled from influencing us and from attaching themselves to us. So cleansing yourself of those demons is a very large part, but it's not the entire puzzle, because in order to strive towards something that's good, we have to know what is good. And if we look back at the story of Adam and Eve, what happened? Well, they were in this garden, and there was one tree that they were not supposed to eat of, that they were not supposed to consume, that they were not supposed to be involved with, because it would give them the knowledge of good and evil. They would be able to see the world like God sees the world. They would become their own God, essentially. And so how do we become our own God? That's a really important question to ask. Because God, there's this central narrative around God. There's this central character around God. We don't fully know God, and we never will, but we can see the patterns and things that God stands for, which is something like holiness. He wants us to be holy. He wants us to be united to Him. But what happens when we determine our own values? Well, when we determine our own values, we become our own God. Because we're not saying, hey, God, like, what do you want me to value? We're saying, no, God, like, I think I know better than you, so I'm going to choose my own values. And so values, like, what am I talking about? Well, we all have our own value structure. We all inhibit a value structure. And we know that we inhibit a value structure because there's things in our lives that we value over the other. For example, if you spend a lot of time with your friends, then that says something like, okay, I value my friendship over maybe even my faith. Like if you're not going to church, if you're not spending time in community with your church and engaging with your faith, then you might be saying, hey, God, like I value friendship over my faith, over going to church or being involved in a spiritual community. And so I'm going to decide my own value structure. I'm not going to abide by the value structure that you laid out for us. And that's a big problem. Why is it a big problem? It's a big problem because it puts us in a position to be our own God, because God has done these things for us. He has shown us His character through the Bible and through the Holy Spirit now. And so if we choose our own values and we don't receive the values from the Lord and try to embody the values that we feel the Lord calling us to, then we become like Adam and Eve in the garden when they ate the poisonous fruit, filled with shame, because everything was really great before they did that. But after they did that, that's kind of where the fall of man all comes back to. So that by putting ourselves in the position of God, we completely miss the whole point of God in the first place. We were never born to be God. We are God's creation. We were created in the image of God, but we were never supposed to be God. We weren't supposed to decide the direction of our life. And that by allowing God to decide the direction of our life, the most high, supreme, holy God, we can relinquish ourselves from that responsibility, and we can realize our life was never really ours in the first place. It was God's the whole time. Okay, so why is this even relevant? Well, in order for you to move forward into your redemption narrative, you need a value structure And you need to know concretely what is good versus bad. Okay, so you have to receive your value structure from an external source, the supreme value structure from God, because you can't come up with it yourself. There's no way. It's not possible. You'll just lead yourself into despair and destruction if you try to come up with it yourself. So then God says something like valuing Him above all, your faith above all, valuing family, taking care of yourself, your fitness, taking care of your body as a temple. What do you fill your temple with? What do you eat? Being a good steward of your relationships with other people, being a good leader, especially for the younger generations. Jesus was very pronounced about that. He said, if any of you are to lead these little ones astray, referring to children, it would be better for you if a millstone was tied around your neck and you were cast into the sea. What? So that he puts a very strong emphasis on leading and stewarding our children. And that's not only your children, that's also children in your community, children all around the world. And so then your value structure, my value structure, is oriented around what I believe God is calling me towards. And not only what I believe, what I've seen demonstrated by Him. And so it's not like I came up with these things. So now we have a value structure. What's the importance of the value structure? The value structure becomes a decision-making map. It tells us, hey, I'm going to put my faith over everything because I know it's the source of goodness and truth. So I need to reflect that in how I go about my life. And so if you can create alignment between yourself and the value structure that you feel God calling you towards, you'll experience a peace like you've never experienced before. You'll experience a sense of joy and fulfillment that you've never experienced before because you're aligning yourself with God. You're not becoming God. You're saying, God, like I am yours. I want to dedicate my life to you. I want to put down my life and pick up my cross. So now we have a God-driven value structure. Now what's a really good way to, because now we have our value structure and we have things like our faith, pursuing family, pursuing fitness, pursuing fellowship, pursuing stewardship, responsible stewardship. So now we kind of have the goal, but how do we pursue the goal? Because it's like, okay, let's, for example, if you wanted to make a certain amount of money in a business, let's say your goal was to make $150,000 or something like that. If that's your goal, there's multiple ways that you can go about that goal. Plenty of different ways. You could start an OnlyFans and sell and prostitute your body. You could sell drugs and, potentially harm people through the means of overdosing and, just contributing to their addictions. So there's obviously really bad and even evil ways that you could pursue these things. You could pursue family with this attitude of, it's all about me. I want to control the family. Like, I don't want my family to have any say. I want them to be slaves to me. So obviously that would be a really evil way to pursue family. So how do we know how to pursue? Well, there's these things called virtues, and then the opposite of virtue, which is a vice. And virtues and vice essentially points us towards, here's how to live your life responsibly and in alignment with holiness. And the reason I'm using the word holiness is because God is holy. And so if we're to align ourselves with God and with our value of God, then we would receive His value structure and we would also receive His wisdom about how we are to live our lives. So virtues show us how to approach our value structure. Because when we say we value something like faith or family or fitness, what we're saying is we want to do things throughout the day that prove that to ourselves. And so it's sort of like a goal setting mechanism where we decide, okay, I'm going to get like into shape. I'm going to start eating healthy so that I can get my body in better shape, so that I can get my mind in better shape. And that'll, physical improvements will lead to mental and spiritual improvements as well. But so that creates something like a goal. But in order for us to move towards the goal responsibly, we have to know how to behave in order for us to move towards the goal. Within our redemption arc, within taking the reins and deciding, hey, I'm going to influence the narrative. I'm not going to let the narrative take control over me. I want to influence the narrative. I want to be responsible for my own life. Now, in order to move into the future and to decide who we want to be, we need a value structure, ideally one that is given to us, not one that we create, because we know that God has a value structure, and He's laid out a value structure for us pretty coherently in the Bible. And so that God has done that, right? Now, if we do that for ourselves, we realize I'm taking the role and the responsibility of God, which that's not going to end well.
Hey, it's me again. I just wanted to tell you something very, very important. I have a coaching program that teaches you all about this stuff and how to become a better version of you. And so if that sounds like something that you're interested in, click the link down below. You can book a call with me. There's no sales gimmicks, anything like that. It's just a personal one-on-one call, and we'll figure out and see if the program's a good fit for you. If not, you might just get some free resources, free value, and a chance to come hang out with me. And yeah, so if that sounds like something you're interested in, make sure to click the link down below, book a call with me, and I will talk to you then.
So we're going to receive the value structure from God, and now we have to learn, okay, how do I actually go about this? How do I be more virtuous? Which might not be a word that you hear very often in secular culture, but we talk about it all the time in Catholic culture. We talk about it all the time because it's so important. It's like everything. Because we are behavior-making machines, and in order for us to grow in holiness and grow in communion with God, we have to understand virtues. We have to have something to steer us, and that's what virtues do. So, in order for you to rewrite your redemption arc, you need a value structure and a virtue structure. And that through that process, through receiving a value structure from God, and through becoming a more virtuous person, through the transformation of your identity, that you will grow and nurture a healthy relationship with yourself. And like we said earlier, when you start to foster a healthy relationship with yourself, you will now know what a healthy relationship is. And when you know what a healthy relationship is, you can now apply that to your other relationships. Because before, you didn't know what a healthy relationship was. All you had known was the unhealthy relationships that you had with yourself and that you'd experienced. But now, it's completely changed. Now when you see that red flag, you're like, oh, like I know that I was that red flag, I carried that red flag, and I know how it impacted my life, and so I know how that impacted my relationship to myself, and so now I know that that red flag is something worth looking at and deciding like, okay, is this person going to be able to really, like, doing my whole character analysis, do I really think that this person is going to be good for me? And so that by refining your character, strengthening your character, you can now perform this character analysis of other people and see where they're at in their journey and determine whether or not, okay, is this person going to help me strengthen my character, or are they going to influence me to weaken my character? And look, I'm not saying to not associate yourself with people who, might be a bad influence on you. Not at all. I think that you should totally do that. But I think you need to be careful. I think we need to be careful. Why do we have to be careful? We have to be careful because we mirror the behaviors of the people that we spend the most time with, whether we want to do it consciously or not. We will mirror other people's behavior. And so if we're spending a whole bunch of time with people who aren't like who we want to become, then we'll start to mirror their behavior. And if we don't have a real specific intent with this person of like, okay, I've done my character analysis of them. I realize that they kind of have this vice that they lean towards. And I'm going to consciously choose to not allow them to influence me on that. But I want to be a part of their life because I want to be a good influence on them, actually. Like, I want to be a good influence on them. I'm not going to let them be a bad influence on me, but, I want to spend like a little bit of time with them just so that they can have someone in their life that cares, that can demonstrate virtuous things, that can show them that there's a different way to live life, and that through living this way, you might actually experience more joy and more peace. So yeah, I'm not saying that at all. So that is really the starting point, and it's a lot. It is a lot to work through, but you can work through it. And so over the past 9 years, it's been an uphill and downhill battle, but I finally feel this sense of peace in my life that I had never felt before. And it was when I started to wrap my identity around God and my faith. That was really the catalyst. Because, I had been working on doing self-improvement things like, working on my exercise routines and my diet and, doing things like meditation and prayer and, then working on my mental health, doing all these different exercises. And they all helped in their own way. But it wasn't until I made that final leap where I decided that God is the most important thing to me. That was the big domino that knocked down all the rest. And that by pursuing God, not only did I get this sense of joy and peace, but everything started to transform. My mental well-being, my physical well-being, my spiritual well-being. Everything started to transform. The way that I perceive relationships now has completely transformed. Like, I know now who my real friends are. I know, how I want to pursue my life. I know what I want to do and why I want to do it and who I want to do it with. And that's everything, man. That's literally everything. That's your whole life. Is deciding how you want to live. And that when you figure out how to live and you learn this new way of life, that you'll be able to invite other people in who will support you in that, who will add only strength and more versatility to the way that you live your life. So that's really the starting point. That's where you got to start. You don't start with the other person. You don't even start really with the relationship itself. I mean, there's so much muddled in there that you could just scratch and claw and dig, and you're not going to find much. I mean, you're almost going to find too much. But by following this process that I've laid out, it will ensure a level of success. Now, obviously, there's a lot of different things that go into what I've laid out. And so I'll be putting out more videos about those things, and I have put out videos about those things before. And so I'm going to try to put out as much value for you as I can in the pursuit of building my YouTube channel. By the way, if you're enjoying this content, if you're getting some value out of this content, please subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything. And, like the video. Like if you thought that, this had a positive impact on you, that's really all I want to do. I don't really care about how many subscribers I have. Honestly, just impacting one life, that fills my heart with joy. And so I don't really care about the metrics of how many subscribers I have, how many views my videos get, how many likes they get, how many comments. To me, those are just kind of like a reflection of like, okay, my videos are finding their audience. But what liking the video can do, if you felt that this video supported you, I'd ask that you return the favor and support me, and not for the wrong reasons. I'm not just looking for vanity metrics. What I want is through you liking my video, it'll actually push this video out to more people and be able to potentially help support them as well in their journey. And then if you comment too, that'll also help push it out to more people. And yeah, if you did that, I'd really appreciate it. But even if you don't, no worries. I'm just happy you're here. But I would absolutely love your guys' feedback and your reaction to the video, because I'm kind of working and fleshing out a lot of these things, and I want to make it super digestible for people. I want to make it as simple as possible so that as many people as possible can receive this message. And yeah, so I'd really appreciate you guys' feedback, especially during these stages of my channel. And, I never really want to lose that. Even if my channel does get big, I want to keep it focused on investing into people. Doing these videos to me is like an investment into people. And yeah, that's kind of my central prayer. So that's the end of this video. We'll talk more about, okay, once you kind of solidify that character and you become that person, how then do you actually go about doing a character analysis? How do you start to read other people and be able to determine who they are based upon their actions and what they say? Because those are really big things, especially in being able to find a partner for yourself and finding friends for yourself, is being able to actually analyze the other people's character and kind of come up with an idea of how it would actually impact you. Okay, so we'll talk about more of that stuff in the future. I've talked a lot about these other things that we've laid out in a little bit more detail in past videos. So if you're looking for more, there is more on my channel. Just go check it out, scroll through the video collection. With the life story part itself, this is really important. With the life story aspect, where we divulge some of your history, I've actually put out examples of that, because I've done life story interviews with other people on my channel. So if you're interested in learning more about how to divulge your own life story, go check out those videos on my channel with like Elliot Hulse, John Schockel, Riley Jarvis, and I've got some more life story interviews planned for this year, which I'm really excited about. But go check out those videos, because I'll ask those people some questions in sort of an entertaining format that can be enjoyable to watch, but it'll also give you questions to ask yourself, and that it'll allow you to start parsing out your own history and your own life. So yeah, I'm super stoked for the future of this channel. I'm already getting some really good feedback with the little bit of feedback that I've gotten. And so I think that we're on to something here. And yeah, we'll see you guys on the next one.